First, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello, welcome back to Fox 12 Now. As always, appreciate everybody who joins us here. We are live streaming on our social media channels, on our apps, and our website, so plenty of places for you to join the conversations that we get to have. And right now, we're actually going to be talking about something that I think is pretty important to anybody who's driving out in the Northwest, particularly here in Oregon, that we're going to be discussing, and that is to watch out for wildlife. If you get out of the city, or even if you're in the city, sometimes it is a definite concern. There are a lot of ways that you can get yourself into trouble, and we're going to talk about how to stay safe out there. We're joined right now by Casey Davey. That's the wrong shot. Let me fix that, Casey. Sorry, we've been switching around from two different newscasts. Let's get this corrected here, and appreciate you joining us and being live with us. There we go. There's Casey. That's a better shot. Casey, thanks thanks for being a part of this. Casey, the PIO for the Oregon Department of Transportation. And Casey, you know, I saw the press release that came out yesterday. This is something that's really important. Can you explain to everybody why this is such an important topic and what it is that we're going to be discussing?
Right. So October and November are really peak migration times for deer and elk. So as they move from their summer habitat to their winter habitat, they often have to cross roads as they make that journey. So now is an especially good time to remember to watch out for wildlife as you're moving across our state.
And there are, you know, so many different times where this is a concern. I mean, anybody who's been here long enough knows that driving out there, you will inevitably run into it, or not run into, see a deer. But this time of year, though, just being such an important issue with that too. It's important all the time, but talking about it for this time of year, like what are some of the biggest concerns that you have with people out there right now?
Yeah, so as we see more and more animals moving this time of year, it's really important to keep an eye out. So, you know, if you see one animal on the side of the road, especially during migrations times, it's really likely that there's a bunch more nearby. So slow down, wait for all of them to move across or to move away from the road. You know, where you see those watch for deer, watch for elk signs, they're placed in known wildlife crossing hotspots. So really keep an eye out and slow down when you see those. You know, as it's starting to get dark earlier, a lot of these animals tend to move in the dark or evening times. So definitely a good thing to look out for right now.
Yeah, definitely. And some of these different safety tips, you know, besides that, aside from that you were talking about, that were in that press release that you had out, I think are really important for people to understand too, on how many deer actually get hit. Some of the number, it was kind of staggering to me. I didn't realize how big it was. Can you talk about that, like what the typical, you know, time frame is for this?
Yeah, so every year we have about 6,500 reported collisions with wildlife across the state. And those are only the ones that were reported on. So there could be a lot more that are happening. About 1 out of every 5 known mule deer deaths in Oregon is actually caused by a vehicle collision. So there's a lot of times when, you know, the deer are crossing the road and there's just nothing you can do. But we do have some infrastructure going into place that should help you avoid animals out there on the highway.
Yeah, let's talk about some of that infrastructure. I know I've got a couple of the videos here that you put out too. Taking a look at some of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this might be demonstrating one of those.
Yeah, so that is showing the new wildlife undercrossing down in Gilchrist when it was being constructed. And so that's our most recent undercrossing that we have made. And those undercrossings are essentially tunnels that will go under a highway, and they're accompanied by miles of fencing on either side of the highway. So when you have those deer and elk or any animals that need to move from one side of the road to the other along their migration paths, they follow the fencing until they get to this break where they can safely cross in a tunnel under the highway and make it to where they need to go without ever having to touch pavement.
And how many of these tunnels are actually going to be constructed right now? We've seen the one, but how many more of those are actually going to go into place?
Yeah, so we currently have 5 on US 97, but we've got plans for more in the works. We actually have plans for a big overcrossing that'll happen on I-5. That one is a little ways down the road, but we're looking at plans right now, and you know, anywhere else we can across the state.
And have you seen those crossings be successful so far, or at least as far as the studies that you've had for what you're constructing for these?
Absolutely. So we've seen about an 85% reduction in wildlife vehicle collisions in areas that have these undercrossings. So that's a huge improvement for not only the animals, but people who are driving through the area, because hitting any sort of animal that can be dangerous for you and damage your vehicle and injuries. And it's just way better if we can keep the animals off the road altogether.
And going back to, you mentioned this at the beginning, but I wonder if we could go back into it. What are some of the biggest things that people can do when they're out there driving just to make sure that they're staying safe and being aware of the potential to hit wildlife?
Absolutely. So staying alert, not driving distracted is super important. Make sure you keep your eyes on the road, and especially in those evening or early morning hours and at night, watch out for animals on the side of the road. And if you see one, expect that you could see more because they often travel in groups where there's more than one.
And you mentioned deer and elk, certainly big animals that could, cause some damage, and certainly don't want to hit them either. So a lot of bad impacts there that could happen between deer, elk, and cars. What are some other wildlife that maybe this time of year that you're seeing are being also hit on the sides of the road?
Yeah, so we have cameras under these undercrossings and they document all sorts of animals. So not only deer and elk, but we've seen bears and cougars and bobcats, wolves and turkeys, badgers, raccoons. We've seen pretty much every walk of life that you can imagine, big and small, that are using these undercrossings. So they really go further than just benefiting the deer and the elk.
Are there plans to down the road create more of these?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have plans further down the works for one on I-5 in the Siskiyous that would be an overcrossing. So that's a large bridge that would go over the highway. And we're working to identify other hotspots in the states where we can direct our focus to design more of these in the years to come.
Yeah, actually, I was wondering that if there's any particular area of the state that you've seen has higher rates of incidents than any other area.
Yeah, we do actually have a map that shows hotspots. And the areas that you'll see hotspots in are there's some areas on I-5 in Southern Oregon, US 97 south of Bend has a lot of hotspots, and there's some around Sisters on US 20. There's quite a few throughout the state, but we're really going to try and focus on our efforts where we see those red lines, the hotspots, and we can do the most good for the most animals and drivers.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you joining us to talk about this and educate the public on this and find out more. If people are aware of that, there's issues out there that can happen. But I think the more you can talk about it, the more they can think about different safety tips they can do, which you mentioned, slowing down, paying attention to the side of the road, and really being more aware, I guess, in general, is probably, I would imagine, one of the biggest things that people can do.
Yes, absolutely. Keeping your eyes on the road, especially areas with dense vegetation on the side when you might not be able to see the animals coming a long ways. Those are areas to especially keep your eyes open and peeled. Also, those wildlife crossing signs, remember that they are placed in areas with known hotspots for those animals crossing the road. So pay extra attention when you see the signs.
Yeah, they're there for a reason, those signs. One final question. In the event that an accident happens, that an incident occurs, is there a recommendation on what somebody should do should that happen?
Absolutely. So call 911 right away, get help from the law enforcement folks, but definitely report that that crash has happened, because, we keep track of all of those things and it helps us identify where we need to place infrastructure in the future.
Very good. Well, Casey, thank you very much for joining us. Short notice, and you were able to come on here and talk about this, and appreciate that, and keeping us up to date on everything that we need to know when it comes to the roads. And for everybody out there who wants to find out more information and follow up, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so ODOT has a website. If you just search for ODOT wildlife undercrossings, you can see all sorts of tips on how to reduce your chances of hitting an animal on the road and all of our plans for wildlife crossings in the future.
All right, Casey, thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
And for all of you joining us here, again, this is Fox 12 Now, but some great advice right there. So follow up there on all the recommendations that she had on where to go. It's important to pay attention and stay safe. Be aware when you're out there on the roads. And like I mentioned, if you're here and for any amount of time in the Northwest and driving, and particularly if you go out of Portland or anywhere else, anywhere in rural Oregon, you're inevitably going to encounter wildlife. So be careful of that. It is not a good thing to get into an accident there. Okay, we have lots of coverage here on Fox 12 now. So again, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, earlier today we had some breaking news, and that was talking about an arrest that was made by the Multnomah County DA for a prominent Portland homeless advocate. So we've got more information on that. You can follow up at kptv.com. We'll have more information throughout the day. For this show, we are streaming live on our social media channels and our apps and our website. If you are watching on our social media channels, we're going to log off here, but we will continue the show on the apps and the website, so you can follow along right there with what we have left for the rest of the day. But if there is breaking news, I'll be right back as well. So certainly follow along for our Facebook and YouTube channel, because you'll get a notification. If there's breaking news that happens, we'll be right here for you. But for right now, head on over to the website and the apps. I'm Greg Nibbles, Fox 12 Now.